Welcome to the 15th episode of the series Decolonizing the Mind. We are living in grave danger. In the times ahead, we might envision a regional war, maybe even a global war. I'm not saying this in a dramatic way. I'm saying it by looking at what's going on in the world now. So, when I started this series, I started with the question, are we going to see the final demise of the apartheid state of Israel? Or are we going into a nuclear war? What we see now is that there are preparations going on for a regional war. And by studying these preparations, we get an idea of where things are heading. And yesterday, I talked about the preparations that Hezbollah was undertaking as one of the major parties. Today, I'll go into the preparations that Iran is undertaking. I look into political, organizational, and military preparations. It's important to, when you study these things, to look at how military experts and military theorists look at war. And two theories are often studied and quoted when you discuss war. One is the Prussian, later German, Prussia became part of Germany. The Prussian general, Karl von Clausewitz, who lived in the 19th centuries. And he basically says war is a continuation of policy with other means. So you have to look at the political goal of a military campaign. If the political goal of that campaign is unrealistic, then the military campaign will lead to defeat. And the goal of Israel and the United States are unrealistic goals, which is the erasing of Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. If that is your goal, you're going into confrontation which will lead to defeat. The other theorist is much older, and 2,500 years ago, the Chinese general Sun Tzu wrote a book, The Art of War. Von Clausewitz's book was titled On War. And Sun Tzu outlines 5 essentials for victory. One, he will win who knows when to fight and when not to fight. And sorry, yesterday when I discussed the interview that Press TV had with Hezbollah Deputy Secretary General Said Qasim, he explained that we will decide when to fight and when not to fight. So he's aware, as Iran, as others are aware of what confrontation to do, when to pick a battle and when not to do it. The second point of Sun Tzu is he will win who knows how to handle both superior and inferior forces. So even if you are fighting a superior force like the Vietnamese did with the US and the Taliban did with the US and the Iraqis even did with the US, they were superior forces. Israel is superior militarily, superior to Hamas. And if you know how to deal with superior forces and inferior forces, you will win. So a so-called weaker forces could win a superior forces if he knows how to handle it. And history is full of examples of it. Third point of Sun Tzu, he will win whose army is animated by the same spirit throughout all his ranks. So he says, war is not just a matter of material, of guns, of artillery, of whatever military means you have. If the soldiers, the ones who are fighting the war, know what they are fighting for, and that spirit of knowing what you're fighting for, and for oppressed people is against oppression, then when all the people are convinced of it, then you will win, like again Vietnam has shown and others. The fourth point, he will win who prepared himself ways to take the enemy unprepared. Basically, that is what Hamas has done on October 7. They were preparing for years to take on Israel unprepared, and it was a big shock. And that was a strategical victory for Hamas to be able to do that. And now the question is, how does Iran preparing itself for the coming confrontation, and what surprises shall we see in the coming weeks and months? And then, fifth point, he will win who has military capacity and is not interfered with by the sovereign. Meaning, once the war goes on, it's the military who decides on the military strategy and tactic, and not the politicians. Now take this into account. If you want to study just scientifically, just because of knowledge, not because whether you support one party or another, if you want to study one party in a war, in this case Iran, then you shouldn't go by the Western views of Iran. You should look, because the Western view gives you a distorted view. It puts Iran as a country of a medieval dictatorship of backward ayatollahs. They don't adhere to the separation of religion and state. The religious police are the proof of it. All Iranians are oppressed, and everyone wants a Western modern society. Thus, Iran can easily be beaten by the West. That is the Western view of Iran. If you want to study a country, a system, study its leaders. If you want to study Russia, look at what Putin is saying and the leaders of Russia are saying. If you want to study China, look what Xi Jinping is saying. If you want to study Iran, look at what Ali Khamenei and other leaders are saying. Now, it's interesting that if you do that, here you see, for example, the latest book, in fact, it's an old book from 1974, but released later, 2 years ago. It's a book by Ayatollah Khamenei, Islamic Beliefs. And he explains what the foundation is of the Iranian society. And I was surprised to see that he defines the basic concept of Islam, Shia and Sunni, is Tawhid. The concept of Tawhid, the concept of the divine unity. There's one God, there's only one God, Allah. And he says literally, a Tawhid-oriented society without classes. All have access to the same rights and possibilities as one another. So if you read those paragraphs, it's basically what the West recognizes as socialism, but then in an Islamic code. And he explains also the relation between religion and science, which in the West led to the separation of religion and science. And he says, no, in our Islamic society, the religion and science go together in harmony. So Iran has developed indigenous knowledge, technological knowledge. He referred to 500,000 knowledge enterprises, private companies and universities and research centers. And he said it should be 400,000, meaning we should invest in technology. And then he puts also limits in how you look at technology. He says nuclear weapons, we have decisively and bravely refrained from it, even though we had the ability. Both making and stockpiling atomic bombs are wrongful because using them is forbidden based on religion. So he says, from a religious point of view, we are against the use of nuclear weapons because it harms civilians in a massive way. So we are against it. But it doesn't mean that other weapons which are destructive, not in the same way as atomic weapon, but certainly for military purposes, should be developed. And he puts Palestine in a broader context. He says the Iranian nation has constantly supported and will support all oppressed nations and the nations that are under the yoke of arrogant powers. So not only Palestine, but they support Venezuela, which is based on Bolivarian socialism, is not a religious, not an Islamic state, and yet they support it. And he said the Iranian regime will always stand by the valiant and faithful people of Palestine. And basically, the goal, the political goal of the support that Iran is giving to Palestine, that support, the purpose of it is to have a free Palestine from the river to the sea. So that's a political goal, and a big problem, a big instrument in achieving a political goal is achieving political unity, especially among the Islamic countries and broader among the anti-imperialist countries. And one of the biggest problems of overcoming the Sunni-Shia divide, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, these are entities, where the Shia-Sunni divide might interfere. But as I explained yesterday in the strategic analysis of Hezbollah, they see that you can work together in the struggle and respect these differences of opinions and ideologies. It's possible, and they do it. Now, the organizational preparations. There's a lot going on now in terms of preparing for the coming war between Iran and Israel and the United States. One of the reports in the MEMRI website, MEMRI is the website set up by Israeli intelligence officers, and they follow the developments in the region. They translate text from Persian and Arabic for an English audience, and they reported that Iran has established and is running a joint operation room shared by Hezbollah in Iraq and Palestinian factions with the goal of gathering intelligence and coordinating attacks against Israel-US forces. So these organizational preparations are going on in Iraq and outside of Iraq. And George Bush termed the resistance the axis of evil, and they call it the axis of honor. And as I explained yesterday, also in the relationship between Hezbollah and Hamas, this is not a relationship of a master and slaves, where the master gives orders to the slaves, as in the West, Hamas is portrayed in relation to Hezbollah and Iran. They are not giving orders, they are giving support. Now, the foreign minister of Iran, Hossein Amir Abdollahian, he had a conversation a few days ago with his Qatari counterpart, Sheikh Al Thani, and he says time is fast running out for Tel Aviv crimes to continue. Due to the expansion of the intensity of the war against Gaza civilians, expansion of the scope of the war has become inevitable. He is saying we are drawing closer and closer to the regional war, and it's not a war only against Israel. It's a war against those leading Israel, which is the United States. Now, if you read what the different military leaders from Iran are saying about the preparations of the coming war, it's mind-blowing. There are many websites, that you could find this information. And the commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, General Salami, Major General Salami, he says, look, the defeat of the Zionist regime and the demise of America are a source for peace and security for the world. So the message which he tells everybody where they are working with, Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, all of them, the message is, people, if we defeat Israel and USA, we will enter a period of peace and security, not just for our region, but for the whole world. So for those who are looking at Iran, that is the message. We will enter a new world of peace and security after the defeat. Second thing is, he says, our enemy lacks strategy and politics. They're operating on the basis of wrong policies, wrong strategies, and that will cause them to lose. And he says, America has lost its former global position and is paying for a regime that has not made any achievements. Now, the Americans and the Israelis constantly are putting out the idea that, Iran should be afraid for the nuclear powers of Israel and USA. And the military leaders of Iran are saying, we are today at a global level, not only in the field of missiles, but also in the fields of drones, space, satellites, defense, radar, and other sectors. We have prepared for all situations. This is the commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of the Aviation Department, Mr. Sadr Hadi. He's saying that we know you have nuclear weapons. We know you have big military powers, but we have prepared for you. We have prepared for the cases which you might use a nuclear weapon, you might do all kinds of things. We are preparing all the scenarios. And now history has taught the United States, which portrays itself as the greatest nation in the history of the world, that is what Biden is saying, that they have been beaten 3 times in Afghanistan, Vietnam, and Iraq. And so these people who are leading the military in Iran are saying the 4th time is coming. And what is important is to understand that the technological capabilities of Iran are based on indigenous technology. And their level of military industrial, I would say complex, but it's not the same as the United States, where the military drives war. In Iran, is politics that defines the limitation of war. And the companies and universities and research centers involved in developing the technological capabilities of Iran, they are so high in their level that they can export weapons now. They have satellites for their own military surveillance. Although they are working with the Chinese, there are now reports how the Chinese are enabling them to use their satellites. And maybe the Russians might do that also. Now, the Russian, Chinese, and Iranians military personnel are working together. Their naval forces in March of this year have staged joint drills in the Gulf of Oman. And the Chinese Ministry of Defense put out their news briefings. They are saying Iran, Pakistan, Oman, the United Arab all have coastlines along the water body lying at the mouth of the Persian Gulf. And the minister says this exercise, the joint drills, will help deepen practical cooperation between the participating country navies and inject positive energy into regional peace and stability. There is this cooperation between the US and China and Israel and Iran. And the commander, Haji Sadeh of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Aviation Force, he analyzes Iran and the America and the communication to Iran. He says, America in their conversation with us, they are not threatening us. They are not saying, I'm going to come and kill you. In fact, their correspondence are in the language of wishes and requests. It says in one night, there are 3 stages of correspondence, all of them saying to the Iran, hey, we are trying to set up a peace accord in Gaza. We want to have some kind of ceasefire. Please don't get involved. Please don't extend the war. Please don't attack Israel. That's the language the Americans are using. It's not, if you attack Israel, we're going to nuke you. That's not the language. And the war is going bad for Israel. In 2006, the Lebanese war, which lasted for a month, the Israeli occupation force suffered 121 troops killed. And since the start of the war against Palestine and Hamas and Gaza, 3 times that number have been killed in 1 month. And this commander of the aviation force is saying, we see that helicopters carrying the wounded and dead, I talk about 356 dead, I'm not even talking about the wounded. He says, we see that the helicopters carrying the wounded and dead are carrying out the transfer back from the Gaza area with aerials refueling, and the helicopters don't have time to land on the ground. So they are observing with the satellites and the means they have, they're observing what is going on in Gaza. And they see that the Israelis are losing people dead and wounded on a large scale, which is not reported here in the press. Interesting, after the Navy drills in March, a month later, the Chinese Defense Minister, General Wei Feng, visited Iran and met with politicians and military leaders, and basically saying, let's develop our relationship militarily with Iran in order to prepare for what might be coming in the months and years ahead. In September, a few months after April, the Russian Minister of Defense was in Iran, Shoigu, and was accompanied by high-ranking Iranian officials visiting Iranian aerospace industry, Iranian defense industry. And guess what? When they are talking, they're not just talking, oh, what can you buy from me? What can I buy from you? What are you doing? They are talking about military strategy in the case of confrontations between Iran and the United States. Now, tomorrow, I will deal with the nuclear threat by Israel. And Iran is preparing for it. Just compare the 2 nations. Iran is a country that is way much bigger than Israel. Israel has 22 square kilometers of surface, and Iran 1,600, million kilometers. So it is very, very different from Israel. Population is about 90 million in Iran and 9 million in Israel, of which 75% Jews. Iran is preparing that this nation of Israel might use nuclear weapons. And tomorrow I'll discuss it. If they use it, how they will use it, what will the effect of it be? Is it the end of Israel, or is it a new World War III? And with that episode of tomorrow, I'll conclude the series which I've started on October the 29th, which was a daily rhythm. Every day I put out a video, except one day when I was struck by the storm here and couldn't work because of electricity. And the theme was world affairs, and especially what's happening in Palestine. But my original plan was to do a weekly series based on my book, Decolonizing the Minds, that explains the DTM theory and practice. So I wanted to do this daily series because I want to put in place how DTM theory is applied to current world affairs, and I needed this daily rhythm just to lay out the whole map of forces that are going to decide the future of the world in the coming month. And I think I've laid out the whole infrastructure of parties. I will follow, obviously, the developments there, but I'll go after tomorrow. I'll go to the original plan of a weekly series every Monday around 12 o'clock Central European Time, where I'll just explain the theory, the decolonial theory of decolonizing the mind and how it applies to practice. And these are things about philosophy, economic theory, decolonial theory, etc. But if actual events are taking place that needs some explanation, I might deviate from it and interject the weekly rhythm with some daily videos. That depends on how things goes. And if you want, to look at the book and what I'm saying about Iran, go to the index and you'll find all the references to Iran. You could download the PDF of this PowerPoint from sandohira.com. And if you want to support the DTM channel, subscribe to it, share it with your friends, families, and colleagues, and encourage them to subscribe, get involved in discussion groups, and make a donation. And at the website, you can see how to do that. So thank you for your attention, and we'll see you tomorrow.